Hi everybody, welcome to today's class where we're going to learn REST API testing. So in today's class, this is a very quick summary of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about what is a REST web service. We're going to give or show you different REST web services out there in the marketplace that you use on a daily basis. We're going to break down the REST web service into a URI, methods, resource, and a parameter. We're also going to show you why authentication is really important in a REST web service. And lastly, where do you go to authenticate? Where do you put this authentication code? Typically that goes in the header. We're going to talk about that as well. Then once we've done the theory side of things, we're going to jump into SoapUI where we're going to show you exactly how to run a typical testing scenario of a REST API. We're going to show you how to create a test case. We're going to show you how to create a test suite. We're going to add an assertion as well. A lot of you in class has been struggling with when do I add an assertion, how do I use an assertion. We're going to clarify all your doubts by showing you exactly how to do that. Lastly, as a software tester, you will spend a lot of your time trying to make sense of your response message. Whenever you run a REST API or a REST web service, you need to know exactly what's going on. And the REST has different status code that we're going to break down and talk about what each of them means to a software tester. So without further delay, let's get started. So what is a REST web service? I like to call this a web service is a software that we use over and over again. So a web service, we can say, is a software that we use very often. And when the internet came about, it really made sense for the IT folks to really become efficient and build software just once and deploy that software on the internet, so that anybody else that needs this software, all you have to do is go to the internet to grab your software. And that was when the idea of web service was being born. Today, all of us consume softwares this way. In class, I told you we have two different types of web services. So we have the SOAP web service and we have the REST web service. I'm not going to spend too much time on the SOAP because this class is all about the REST. REST is a performance-based web service. And the reason is, once you hear the word performance, speed should come to your mind. We are really thinking about having millions of users consume this web service, so it really needs to be very fast. And that's where speed is really important in web service. You might hear the name RESTful. This means the same thing. We're also talking about a REST web service. You might hear the name API. It means the same thing. So don't be scared or don't feel confused when you are at a job and they mention, REST, RESTful, API. They're saying the same thing. They're trying to tell you that there's a piece of code or a piece of software that lives somewhere on the internet, and if you have connection to an internet, then you can go there to access the software. So that's what a REST API or a REST web service is in a nutshell. Now going back to our class notes, what are examples of REST web services? In class, I told you that a lot of us, we have something called a single sign-on. Single sign-on is a phenomenon that allows us to use only one username and password. And the idea is, if everybody has a Facebook account, then we can assume that let every other website go to Facebook to validate their users. If everybody has a Google account or a Google email, then let every other website go to Google to validate their users. And we use this every day in every software. And the one I showed you in class, if we go to the popular2plugs.com and I try to log in, I can continue with Facebook. This here is a REST web service, because the moment I click continue, this website will go call Facebook and say, hey, can you validate this person for us? And once Facebook says yes, this person has been validated, then 2Plugs would allow you in based on Facebook's response. Some websites use Google. This is a web service. Let's go to msn.com, where I get most of my news every day. This website here, it's a page that looks like a media page. You know, to an untrained eye, you might think Microsoft created all these news media content. But no, Microsoft actually called several web services. They called several news media web services and they displayed the result on their page. And you can see the name of the web services they're calling. This is a CNN web service. This is an Huffington Post web service. This is from CBC. This is from Canadian Press. This is from MSN Deal. This is from Fox News. And these are web services that we consume every day. So let's go back into our class notes. Now that we have an idea of what a REST web service is, we've seen examples of REST web services. Now let's break it down. What exactly does a REST web service look like, or what does it contain? The first thing you will see or might get given to you on the job is what we call a URI. In a SOAP web service, that is the WSDL. That's the first thing that gets given to you. In a URI, which I'm going to show you very shortly, in SoapUI, you have what we call the endpoint. It's a very long, I'll call it a web address. It's a very long web address that might look confusing, to a new user. And let me show you an example of what this might look like. In your class note, I gave you several URI, and this here is an example of a URI. Something like this. It seems like a website name. It's very, very long, but we're going to break it down very shortly. But this is how you get started, and they give this to you. Then you can go into any testing tool and carry on your testing. Now this long URI has a few things that we need to really talk about. The first one is it has what we call the endpoint. What is an endpoint? An endpoint is where the REST web service lives. This could be somewhere on a server, somewhere in a different country. It could be on a cloud somewhere, but this REST web service was deployed somewhere, and for you to access it over the internet, you need to go to the endpoint to call the REST web service. And if you are to go back to the URI, you will notice that the first part of it looks like a website. That's exactly the endpoint. The next thing you find in a URI is your resource. The resource is very simply the name of the web service. Typically, this has, a backslash, some name. It might have two names. You might have maybe the name of the folder, and you might actually have the actual name of the web service. Or it might be a three-tier system where you have a folder, and the name of the web service. This, it can be as long as you want it, but typically, once I see the endpoint, the next thing you'll find in your URI is the name of the web service that you're trying to test. So let's go back into the example I showed you in class, and you can see right here that this whole thing here is my endpoint. This 3721 is just a port number telling me how to get in. For the non-IT people, don't worry about that. But what you're really looking for is the first backslash. Now this is the web service. I know the name of the web service is token, and I can find token in this folder or in this file system. So these two things here is your resource. Now the next thing you find in a URI is your parameters. Parameters are typically your test data. So this is where you can change things. This is where you come to life as a software tester, because this is now where you're playing, with some data. You can't really change the endpoint, right? That's static. You can't really change the resource name. But what you can play around is with it's your test data. Now, test data, they always start off with a question mark. And I find that's kind of like a given. It's telling you, I'm waiting for something from you. Give me something. And that's where you notice the question mark. Go back into your class example. You can see here now that I have the endpoint, I have the resource, and after the question mark, I have something called grant type. And it's saying the value for grant type is, and it goes on and on and on. It's password, and you can see right here. This will get clearer once we get into SoapUI. But your data, which we call your parameters, can be as many as the resource allows. So once you see a URI and you know how to find the endpoint, you know what a resource looks like, you know exactly what you have to provide, which is your test data, your parameters. Now, what do we do on a web service? The REST web service has methods, which is a function that you can perform on the REST web service. And the easy thing about the REST, unlike the SOAP web service, is every REST web service has the same function or has the same method. And popular methods is get, post, delete, update, put. And we can guess what these methods means. Get is when I want to get something from the server, from the web service. I want to retrieve something from the web service. Post is when I want to put something into the web service. Delete, you want to remove something from the web service. Put works very similarly to post. So different web services, they all understand the same methods, but you might find one REST web service might only understand 2 methods. Another web service might understand 3 methods. Another one might understand 4 methods. And part of your testing is to make sure that you verify that, and you also do some negative testing to see if this web service truly cannot understand, another method. But we're going to get there. I will show you exactly what that looks like. So I think everyone is probably getting bored right now with the theory. We're going to jump into the actual testing where I'll show you what a REST web service looks like. But before we do that, there's something else that is very peculiar to a REST web service. And that is what we call the authentication and your headers. In SoapUI, Soap Web Service was really built for security, meaning that if I don't give you my whistle, you cannot never guess what method or what functionality the web service is. You can't guess the name, you can't guess the data type, you can't guess what data I need. There's no way you can really find me. Unlike REST, where we have the common methods, everyone has the same method. I can easily guess your endpoint. You know, if I know exactly what website you have, I can guess your endpoint, and the resource name is not rocket science. You can easily get that as well. So how do we secure the REST web service? Most REST web service, they have what we call authentication, which is they need some kind of username and password, or some kind of token, or some kind of, they need to know who you are before they allow you to carry out different methods on the REST web service. And once I get into SoapUI, I'll show you how to authenticate yourself. Now, please note this. Not every REST web service requires you to get authenticated. But most likely, you know, if you're in a company, you're on a job somewhere, and if this REST web service is really useful, then it makes sense to really put some authentication layer in there. So let's get started. I'm going to show you in SoapUI. I have a URI right here, which is a very simple URI that we're going to start testing right away. But before we even get into SoapUI, can anyone tell me what the endpoint is? So by looking at this, I know that this is the endpoint. I know that this is the name of the resource. The folder is called version 2, and I'm testing exactly some REST web service called swagger.json. It doesn't have any parameters because there's no question mark in there. So I can tell that this REST web service doesn't need anything from me. It's a very simple REST API or REST web service. So let's copy this now, and we're going to go into our SoapUI. I'm running a version 5.5. Once you're there, click on the REST icon at the top to create a new REST project. Now it's going to ask me to paste my URI. I'm going to paste this in there. And I'm going to give you some time in case you're typing this out. You can easily type this out if you're watching from home. I'm going to show you as well where I found this URI. Is really easy. But once you're done typing, press OK. And voila, this is my first REST API. You can see right away the endpoint, as I mentioned. We can see the resource, and because there's no question mark in there, there are no parameters, so it's very simple. It doesn't need anything from me. It's very straightforward, and these are the methods that we mentioned about. And you can see it doesn't matter what web service you are, they all use the same method. The header, the way to authenticate will be in the header section of the request message. If I was to click here, you can see here now that it's asking me for some kind of data. Give me a header information and give me the value of that header. As I told you, not every web service requires that. So let's test to see if this guy requires a header or not. I'm going to push play, and the method is get. So I'm trying to retrieve something from the web service. I push play, and it's telling me that the content I'm trying to view cannot be viewed as an XML. So in class I told you that SOAP understands XML, while most REST web service understands JSON. So when you see this, don't get discouraged. Just click on the JSON tab, and you can see here the response from the server. So the server is telling me that whenever you press get, it returns back something like this, and this here is a JSON response message. Okay. Now I can't really, there's not much testing I can do here because there are no parameters, and you can see that this worked as well without a header information from me. So let's go back into our class notes and let's pick on the next topic. So I've shown you how to create a very simple REST API in SoapUI. Now let's move on to how do we create test cases and how do we create a test suite. I'm going to use a different REST API because in reality I don't know how many test cases I can really create from this simple REST API. So let's go back into our class note and let's pick on a more complex, relatively complex REST web service. So we're going to use this URI right here, and I'm going to create a new project by clicking on this icon. I'm going to paste my URI in there, and when you paste in, make sure you don't paste it twice. You can always tell by just looking at your URI. Does it make sense to you? Does it have an endpoint? Does it have your resource? And does it have a question mark? Okay, it has parameters as well. If it does make sense to you, you can press OK, and voila, this has parameters. And SoapUI has made it very easy for you to change the values of your parameters. So simply just come in here. You can see question mark grant type is password. I can come in here and change that value. Scope, I can come in here as well and change the value. Let me try to run this web service without a header and let's see what would happen. So I'll click on JSON and it's telling me that good. It's saying unauthorized. You need full authentication before you can access this resource. Perfect. So whenever you see this, you know that you need some kind of header information before you can proceed to run this web service. Now most companies will give this to you, so you don't have to go too far. You can always ask somebody in the company that, can I get the header information for the web service? So back into our class notes, I can go in there now and I'm going to use this header information. So the name, the header is authorization, and the value is this long keyword. Make sure there's no space at the end of it, and make sure there's no space in the front of it. Once you confirm that, you can press enter to save it, and let's try it again. The method as well is quite important. The company will tell you what method this resource understands. So I believe get or post should work, but we can leave it at get and we can run this web service. Now we're still getting some problems. It's still saying an error. So let's go back into our class note and see what else have we done wrong. In your class note it says enter 2 more parameters. So sometimes some web services actually need you to create more parameters for the web service to really respond back to you. So in this case we have to create a parameter called username, and this is the value, and we also have to create another parameter called password with this value. So let's try that very quickly. I'll click on my plus, click on username. I believe the value was max 2. I'll create a new parameter called password, and the value was this. So let's just confirm that. So this looks good, and so we've done this already. We've done this, and it says, oh, there you go, ensure the method is set to post. So let's change that as well. We'll change the method to post, and we're going to try it again. And voila, we got back a response from the server. So going forward for this web service, we need a token for us to call the other web services. So in this company, the first web service you can call is the token, and the token will return back to you by giving you a token number. Then you can now take that token number to test the other web services. So let's try another web service. In your class note, I gave you a second one with another URI. So what we can do is we can copy this URI, and there are two options here. You can decide to create a new project, or you can decide to put this new URI in your same project. Because I'm lazy, I'm just going to put it within the same project. So I'll right click on my project name, and I'll say new or I can right click here. This is my endpoint. If you know that the endpoint is the same, right? If I compare this http QA test 2plugs.com 3721, the endpoint is the same as the first one. Then I can just come in here, the same endpoint, and just say generate a new resource, because a resource is a new web service. So my first web service was a token. Now I want to test another web service. So I'm going to say new resource. It's asking me for the name of the resource, or if you don't know it, just give me the entire URI. So because I'm lazy, I'm just going to paste the entire URI in here, and SoapUI will figure it out. So you can see right here, SoapUI figured it out by it's the same endpoint. This is token, and the name of this new web service is called services 2526, right? So I hope you guys are now beginning to understand, whenever you see a URI, you can find the name of the resource, you can find your endpoint pretty easily. So now that we have a new one, how do we run this guy? Let's go back into our class notes. So class note says we need to create. I think we've done this before. Okay, we've done this. So this is the second one. All right. Now it says make sure you get the authorization from the first one, right? We need that token, so which makes sense. So now in my header, I would create the same value, authorization. So my header for my second web service, authorization. Now what's the value? For the value, I'll go back to the first guy and copy this access token. Copy that, bring it back here, and in my value, I'll paste it there. Press enter. Go back into your class notes. Now it says I need to put this keyword bearer. Keyword bearer, where's that coming from? If you were to pay attention to your first token here, it's telling you the type of token. So the type of token is a bearer, which means you're a real person. So everywhere I go, they want to know I'm a bearer, I'm a real person, and they want me to copy this. So I'm going to copy this bearer as well. Go back into your first request message and carefully insert the bearer in there with a space. Press enter once you're done, and go back into your class notes. Now it looks good. We have this has the header name, and we have this has the header value. But please, at home, make sure that you get a unique token number, because the one in your class note has clearly expired. All right, now that we have the right authorization, we have the right value, let's run this web service. So the method is get. So we'll leave it at get, and we'll run the get web service. So I know I can view it as an XML. I'll try JSON, and voila, I get back my REST response. Now you can begin testing now, because this is what you are there for, to verify that this response is your expected value. Now, when you start testing, maybe you have 5 test cases in mind. You might have a negative test case, you might have a positive test case, or maybe you have another resource for a negative, for example. Maybe you want to see if there's 2527 as just for negative testing. Oh yeah, we have 2527. You might have a lot of test cases in mind. So how do we create a test suite, and how do we create a test case? First of all, what is a test suite? A test suite is just a collection of test cases, and that allows me to run my test cases at once. So meaning, if I have 10 test cases and I put all that 10 test case inside of one test suite, I only have to push the play button once and not 10 times. So let's go back in here. I can rename my first test case, maybe rename it to my test case ID, TC001. Maybe this says verify service 2526, right? And let's create another one. So to create another one, I'm just going to right click on the method and say give me a new request, and I'll call it TC002 verify service 2527. So I have 2 test cases. I can create another one. I'll make this maybe a negative test case to say what would happen to this web service if I don't provide any resource name. What would happen? So TC003 no service provided, and I press OK. So now I essentially have 3 test cases, and my first test case, just make sure my data is correct. It's 2526, so make sure that's 2526. I run it, something happens. Okay, I can close that. My second test case is 2527, expand it. If I run this, okay, now it's telling me I've got a problem. I have to also copy now my header, which is quite annoying in SoapUI, and that's why we have better tools for doing this. Postman has become an easier testing tool, but SoapUI is still easier to understand for newbies, because they have a very simple interface. And once you know exactly what you're doing for your co-op, most of you will be using Postman. But very quickly, let's quickly copy the header information from the first test case. So we'll go into our header. If this is too tiny for you, you can always drag it a little bit, so that way you get more room. Or you can use this tab here. See this tab? If I click on it, it shows me my entire response, and if I click on this, it shows me your response or request. So you can do it as you want. Some people don't like this tab view, some like it divided. It doesn't matter which way you like it, but let's copy quickly the header information. So we're going to create a new header, and we'll copy the value as well. Okay, now let's try it. Alright, so that worked for 2527, so that's beautiful. Now third one as well, let's copy the header information, and let's copy the value. And if I was to push play, that works as well. Now this is a negative. We said no service provided. So what I'm going to do is let me maximize this so you guys can see it easily from home. I'm going to remove the service number and I'm going to push play, and something happened, something came back, but I'm sure when you're testing, this is where you can find out that what's coming back, is this exactly what you're looking for or not. Okay, so now we have 3 test cases, and you notice every time I ran 3 of them, I had to push 3 different play buttons, which doesn't make sense. So the best way to do this is to now create what we call a test suite. But let me make sure my SoapUI is clean. I have a lot of pages open. Okay, I can close this as well. So I want to create a test suite, and to do that, I'm going to right click on my first request message, and I'll say add to test case. Then it's going to tell me, Ty, you don't have any test suite. I'll say yes, please create one for me. Call it test suite 1. Press OK. It's also asking me for the test case name. I would advise you to just copy the same name here. It makes things easier for you, or you can just use the test case ID. It's entirely up to you. Press OK, and don't change anything here. Keep it as the default and press OK as well. Now if you notice, I have this folder called test suite, and inside of my test suite I have this green check mark, and inside of that I have my test case, which is essentially the same guy here that was just copied and put down here. And this is what it looks like, but we'll come back to this. Let's try the second one. So for the second one, right click as well and say add to test case. Now it's telling me that I already have a test suite and I already have a test case, but I'm not going to select this. I will select please create a new test case in the test suite 1. So I'll press OK to that, and then same thing here as well. I'll copy my test case name, or is entirely up to you. You can also copy your test case ID. Don't change anything in here. Leave it as the default and just press OK. Now your test suite is getting very large. You can see it now. There's so many things going on. So to keep things simple, you can just minimize the first one and minimize the second one. It's easier to see it this way. You have one test suite and you have 2 test cases. Let's quickly do for the third one as well. So I'll right click on the third one, add to test case, and I'm gonna select my now don't forget, it's no longer the second one, it's the third one now, because it's saying I have 2 test cases. So I'm gonna say test suite 1, create a new test case, and I'll give it a name as well. So the same name, no service provided, and I'll press OK. So I have 3 test cases. Now if I also click on my test suite, this box here would open up, and inside of my test suite I have 3 test cases. If I push play, just one play button, you can see that my 3 test cases all ran at the same time. And this is how we work on the job. This is how you do your job. If I give you if I give you 50 resources, I don't expect you to test all 50 by pushing 50 play buttons. No, I expect you to have, I don't know, maybe you have, for 50 resources, you might have 75 test cases, you might have 100 test cases, and I expect all of those test cases to be inside 1 or 2 test suites, and you can test things very quickly. So that's how you create a test suite, and that's how you create a test case. Now, the next topic is how do we add an assertion? And what is an assertion? If you notice in here, we got all greens. Everything is passing. Finish, finish, finished, and everything is passing. But did we really check that the response message is exactly what you want it to be? Were you checking for any values at all? The answer is no. And what is happening here is SoapUI will pass your test case as long as the server returns something. That thing could be garbage. That thing could be not the expected result. But hey, as long as the server returns something, then SoapUI would always pass your test case. So now how do we add our own checkpoint into this? We call that assertion. And to create an assertion, you can't do it here. You can only do it inside of your test case. So for the first one, I'm going to add an assertion. So I'm going to expand my test case. I will double click on the service itself. And this is how you create an assertion. Now make sure that you at least run the service once. And look to the bottom. You'll notice that we have 0 assertion. Make sure that you're getting back a response. And now we can create as many assertions as you want. If what I'm trying to verify is every time I run this web service, I want to ensure that art and photography is returned. So I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to press the assertion. And there are different assertions, right? If I go to property content, there's contains. I'm going to explain these other ones very quickly. But let's try contains. Everyone knows contains from SOAP. So we'll try contains and we'll press add. Now what exactly are you looking for? I want to verify arts and photography. I'll press OK. And you can notice now that the assertion is gone up to 1 and is green because it's telling me that in your response message, yes, I do see art and photography. But let's put something invalid in there and let's see if it's going to fail it. So if I want to update my assertion, click on your assertion, double click on the contains, maybe let me put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let me press OK. You can see that it failed it because it's saying, hey, I couldn't find arts and photography 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in your response message. So these assertions is now, yes, now we're testing. Now you're putting in something expected into your response message. But let me quickly fix this. So I'll double click on the contains again and I'll change it back to arts and photography, and voila, it's passing again. Now what if you want to verify the whole tag, not just art and photography, but you want to verify that name is equal to art and photography? Or maybe you want to verify that username is equal to admin, or maybe email is equal to admin at 2 plugs. Someone might say, oh, that's very easy. Just copy the whole thing, right? Copy the whole thing, create a new assertion, call it contains, and call it so whatever you want to call it, and paste it in there and press OK. If you notice something has gone wrong, it's telling me that is missing, but I know this is a lie, that it is there. I can see it. It's not missing. I just saw it right now. So why are you telling me it's not there? Someone might say, well, it's because we have a double quote. Okay, all right. So let's go remove the double quote. And let's see if that would work. You notice that even with the double quote, it's still failing it. Now, why is that? JSON is very different from XML. In XML, we can just copy the entire tag and things would work easily. But in JSON, we have, these are different paths, and these paths have to be treated differently. Now for the non-IT users, there's an easier way to find the path for every element in your response message. And the easy way is to download something called a JSON path finder. Now you might ask me, where do I get that from? If you have Chrome, Chrome actually has an add-on that you can install called JSON Path Finder. So what you do is go open up a Chrome browser, and in Google, so go to Google and type in this keyword. Type in install JSON Path Finder on Chrome. So just copy that in here. Install JSON Path Finder in Chrome. Press enter, and the first one is what you're looking for. So JSON Path Finder, Google Chrome. And when you click on that, because I have it, so that's why it's saying remove from Chrome. For the first time users, when you don't have this, it just stay in add to Chrome. When you add it, it's going to show you a message, or once you're done installing it, you notice this icon here would now appear in your browser. So every time I open up my Chrome, I have this JSON Path Finder in there. And I advise anyone new to IT to always use this. It makes your life easy, and you don't have to worry about the path for JSON, the JSON path. So let's click on this Pathfinder, and when you click on it, it's going to tell you, hey, I can help you. Copy your response message and tell me any path you're looking for, and I will help you find the name of the path. I go, really? You can do that for me? So let's copy it. So I'm going to copy everything from here, and I'm going to paste it in my JSON Pathfinder. And it looks very scary, but what I was trying to look for was the name, what's art and photography, right? I was trying to verify that my response message contains this tag. So what you do is the name of the node, you type in name, make sure the path type is JSON. If it was SOAP, it's going to be XML, but it's JSON for REST, and you press submit, and this nice tool gets you the name, the path name. So it's telling me now that I found something, name, art, and photography. So name, there are many places where we have name, but you can see the one I really care about is the one that has art and photography. So this is the path. So all you have to do is just copy that path, go into your SoapUI, and now in my contains, I don't want to use contains anymore, so I'm going to delete this one. I can either right click, you can say assertion. Okay, let's create a new assertion first of all. To delete this guy, all you can do is click on this X over here, and it deletes, it's gone. Now let's create a new assertion, and this is now where you need your JSON path. So there are different types. I'm going to send you a document that explains how to use all of them, but what we're really looking for is your JSON path. So this is a JSON path expression to compare the node and their expected value. Okay, I like this guy, so I'm going to click on JSON path match, click on add the path expression, paste that in there from your Chrome, and what's the value? Chrome is, this is what I'm looking for, right? Arts and photography, and I'll paste that in here. Now you might notice that press save, this is still not working, right? And why is that? The reason is, go back in there, we have to replace now the double quote with a square bracket. And once you press save, and let's run it again. And it was not working. Let's see why. So it's telling me that it was expecting arts and photography, and the actual was arts and photography. Let's see why. Alright, so what did I do to fix it? I actually went back in there and I removed the square bracket. So pardon me, we don't need a square bracket in here. I also removed the double quotes. So basically leave the data without no double quote and no square bracket, and just press save, and you notice that the assertion is working. Now let's try another one. Let's pick in my response message, let's say I'm trying to verify that the first name is Flippo. So I want to verify the first name is Flippo. So I'm going to go back into my my JSON Pathfinder, and I want to find the path, the JSON path for this node. So I will copy first name in here, press submit, and you can see he found, oh, there's a lot of first names. Wow, where's the one with Flippo? Can we find Flippo in here? Okay, we finally found the one with Flippo. So you can see that this is the path for the one with Flippo. So I'll copy that path name, copy that, go into my create a new, and I'm going to use the JSON path match, press add, call it whatever you want to call it, put my expression in there, and my value that I'm looking for, my expected value, is Flippo. Now I'm going to remove the double quotes because I don't need it, and I'll save it, and voila, my assertion is now passing. So that's how we create assertions in a REST API. There are different types of assertion, and I'm going to give you a document in here that explains how to use each one of them. They all do different things, and you might not need to know all of them, but at least you can always refer to this document and it shows you how to use it. Now please don't forget, you need to know your JSON path. Once you get familiar with IT, you don't need any more help from this tool. You can simply work it out yourself. But for the new guys, always use the JSON Pathfinder, and that will tell you exactly the path. But if you're curious, how does it find this path? It's basically starting from the parent, the child, the grandchild, the great-grandchild, and the great-great-grandchild. That's what's going on in here. So if I'm looking for the first name, it's telling me, embedded is the name of the parent, and right there, that's embedded, right? Then it's telling me the next thing is services. So I can see right here, services is the next one. Now we have so many different types of services. It's telling me that this is the first service, and that's why that's 0. Then once I know the first one, okay, then the next parent is telling me the user. So if you scroll down, you can probably find user right there. So that's the I guess grandchild. Then it's telling me there's something called user profile. That's the great grandchild. So that you can see somewhere here there was something called user profile right there, user profile, and voila, there's the first name. So it's just a path, it's a path to whatever you're looking for. That's what the path name is. But anyways, life is easy with JSON Pathfinder, so always use JSON Pathfinder. And please don't forget, you just want to verify. If all you're verifying is just your data itself coming back, then use contains. Use this very simple contains, verify your data, move on. But if you want to verify the entire tag, right, which is the element itself and the data being returned, then you need to use one of the JSON path match. Okay. So we're almost done. The last topic, which is really important, is for testers especially, is how do we debug a REST API response message when things go wrong. Because when you're testing, things will go right probably half of the time. The remaining half of the time, things might go wrong. And when things go wrong, there could be 1 million things that could be wrong. But how do you know how to debug and guess exactly where the problem is? We always rely on what we call the status code. In your class note, I've given you the most popular status code, and I've given you the meanings of those status code. But I find the easiest way to explain this is to try it out and show it to you. The first status code is the 200, and this is when everything goes right. So whenever you see the 200, you know that everything is fine and you've done something good. And most of the time as well, when you have a 200, you don't even go look for the status code because you're probably happy with your request message. Like right here, I ran something, I got back something, and I'm happy with it. Now, if I want to go find out what the status code for this happy moment is, you will click on the header information, and if you go scroll to the very top, there'll be something called status. To the bottom. Keep going down to the bottom. In your status, it means your status code, you can see here that 200 means, hey, the server responds back to you, everything was fine, there was no problem, and carry on, everything is fine. And you get this most of the time, but you get this only half of the time. What about the remaining half? Now, that's why we have to learn the other status code. And I find in interviews as well, when you go for a job interview, this is a good way to tell an experienced API tester, because most likely if you've been testing this for over 1 year, you would have come by all this status code. So it's a good way to always test out the inexperienced person from the experienced one. So they might ask you, what does the status code 400 means? What does the status code 500 means? What does the status code 200 means? And it's really important that you explain to them, what it means, because it shows that you're very experienced. So the official name for the first one, the 200, is what we call the OK. So that's the OK status code. What about the 400? The 400, the official name is bad request. And whenever you have a 400, you know that you've done something wrong, that your request message, there's something missing in your request message. You've made an error. So it's most likely, don't go waste your time looking for anything else. Just go into your request message because you know you've done something wrong. Now let's bring up a 400. What if I try a wrong password? So let's go back into our maybe this very first one where I had to provide, no, actually let's go back into our token. In my token, I had to log in, right? I had to provide a username and password for my token. What if, the QA was, the developer was lazy when he gave it to me, or he had a typo and he gave me the wrong password? So he gave me max2 and he gave me a wrong password, but everything else is correct. My header is correct, right? My username is correct, endpoint is correct, my resource name is correct, but there's a wrong password. Now you run this, and when you run this in your JSON, it's saying bad credentials. When experienced testers see this, we know that, okay, there's something wrong in my parameters. But also, someone that is quite advanced, maybe this error message might not make sense. What I would do is I'll go into the header for my response, and I'll see what the status is. If your status is 400, right away, I'm not going to waste time. I know that I've done something wrong here, that my input is wrong. So I'll check again my grant type, confirm from the company. Hey guys, is that the right value? I'll check this guy here, make sure is that the right value. I'll check my username, and oh, my password is the wrong one. So 400 means bad request. If I fix this, it works again, I get back the right thing. You notice my status has changed back to 200, which means okay. Alright, so don't forget your 200 and your 400. It's going to save you time when you're debugging. The next one is 401. 401 means unauthorized. It means you're not allowed, you don't have the proper authorization to use this web service. And let me give you an example of when that might happen. Maybe you are using an expired token. So it's the right username, is the right password, but hey, if you become inactive on this web service, after 30 minutes we time you out for security reasons. So if you're trying to come back, maybe an hour later, everything is fine, but your token has expired, you will get back a 401. Let's try that. So to save time, I'm using an old token. I'm using an old token that is clearly expired. I'm going to go into my SoapUI and I'm going to paste that token into one of my headers. So in my header information here, I'm going to use an old and expired token. Okay, now if I was to run this guy here, it's telling me right away invalid access token. So I know that okay, and obviously my assertions are failing because art and photography is not returned. The other one is not being returned, and the other one is not being returned, so it's failing. But why is it failing? The error message is good. You're lucky because this developer is giving you a nice error message that's saying, hey Ty, invalid access token. But also, even if the developer doesn't give you a good message here, your status will tell you exactly what's going on. And if you look at my status in here, 401. So I know that highway 401. So don't forget this. So 401, oh, you know that nothing is wrong, but you don't have the right authorization. And what that is meaning is basically your header. So you see a 401, maybe my header has timed out, or my header, I have the wrong value. Okay, these things save you time because there are so many things that can go wrong. It could be this, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. But when you know what the error status code means, it really saves you time to solve your problem. Okay, the next one is 404. And for any Canadian, these are highway names, so I think it might make it easier to remember. Highway 404, Highway 401, Highway 400. I don't think we have Highway 200 just yet. But 404, what does that mean? That means you have a wrong resource. That's actually one of the easiest ones. So maybe, for example, now my resource name, maybe let's go back to one of these guys here. It's services, but maybe when I was typing it out, I don't know, I put in 12, maybe by accident. I have the right header, I have the right endpoint, but my resource is wrong. Once I press play, it tells me no message found, 404. So once you see a 404, then you know right away that in your header as well, in your status message, you can see a 404 in there. Then you know right away that 404 means it also means the official name is not found. And when that happens, that means you have the wrong URI or you have the wrong resource name. So when I see that, I just go right here to the top. I'm looking at this and I'm looking at this to say, not found. What is wrong? Is it my endpoint or is it my resource? So I can fix this guy now by removing the 12, and once I push run, everything works just fine. So that's 404. The next one, it's 405. Now 405 is a very interesting one, and it means the method is not allowed. When I was telling you about methods, I told you that some web services might only understand 2 methods. Some might only understand 3 methods. Some might understand 4 methods. Some might only understand 1 method. Now you get the error 405 when you're trying to run a method that a web service does not understand. And let's try that out. So in this first one here, in the header information, the web service tells you all the methods it actually understands. So let's go back to our token, and that's the easy one. In the token one, if you look at the header information, it tells you that, hey buddy, I understand these methods. I understand the get, I understand the head options, post and put. So some of you are telling me in class, Ty, when I ran get for token, it worked. When I ran put for token, it worked. That's because he understands it. But let's try delete. Delete is not in here, right? It doesn't understand delete. What if, as a negative test, I want to test that this token resource does not understand the delete? When I push run, you will get back is actually blank. So this is the one that you need. Let me see, why is it blank? Let's see the status. 405. So that tells you right away when you see a 405 that the method is not allowed. And this is why you need to know your status code, because the responses, there's nothing in there. See, there's no response. So for a new QA, you're running the delete, you're getting back no response, and you're confused. What's going on? Is it me? Is it them? And you just sat there, you don't want to ask anybody because you don't want to look stupid. But once you just look at the status code, oh, 405, oh, that means the method is not allowed. So right away you know it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, it's not your header, it's not your parameter, it's your method that doesn't work. So you can now pick a method that works and run it again, and you get back a message. So the key thing here is don't always rely on having a nice pretty message, because developers are lazy sometimes. They don't return anything, but they will always have this status. The way the web service was designed, every response would always have a status code. Now the last one, it's we call it the 505, the 500, and the official name for that is internal server error. And when this happens, this means that you've given the server, you're giving the web service something that it doesn't understand. You know, it doesn't know what to do with it. It's very confused. So because it doesn't know what to do with it, it just kind of says, hey, I don't know. And you get back this internal server error. And you know, the big ones is maybe this service goes down, or you provide an invalid, let's try this, maybe an invalid parameter. You know, I tried the invalid password, right? And that made it complain. What if I tried an invalid parameter? Because every time I run this web service, token is expecting 4 parameters. It knows that the value would always change because I'm the one testing it, but it's not expecting the parameters to change, right? It's expecting something called username. What if one day by accident I remove the R and I just say username and I try to run this? You can see that the server, it doesn't even know what to do, because it's like, what is username? I'm expecting username, and that's where you get back a server error, and is a 500. And this is one of the most popular ones that you'll be getting back. Okay, So let's fix this back again. I'll change this back to username. I'll run this, and you can see now that is working again. So that's how you debug with your status code. I advise you guys to try it out yourselves because it's a very popular interview question. I will be asking you this as well while you're doing your co-op with us, but please make sure you don't forget it. So before we wrap up, let's have a quick summary of what we spoke about today. We spoke about what a REST web service is. We showed you different examples of web services. We broke it down into the component. So by seeing a URI, everybody can pick out the endpoint, everybody can pick out the resource name, and everybody can pick out the parameters, which is the data that they're asking from you. Everybody knows that the web service has methods, and different web services have different methods that they understand, but we know that every web service understands the same method. We know that web services also have something called authentication, and we put that in the header section of the request message. And this is the way we make the rest a little bit secured. Then we use the testing tool called SoapUI. I told you guys there's also Postman. It's also a very popular one in the industry, but SoapUI is a little bit easier to explain for newbies. In your co-op, you'll be using Postman. In the SoapUI, I showed you how to create a very simple REST project. I showed you how to read your endpoint. We showed you how to see what method it is, look at your parameters, and look at your resource. We also showed you how to create a test case and a test suite, because that's the fast way of doing it. So you only push one play button once, and that saves you time from running every individual request messages. Lastly, an assertion. So everyone now knows how to add an assertion to your response message, and because it's a JSON response, we have to provide the JSON path finder. Is a path, and I've shown you guys how to install the JSON path finder extension in Chrome, and once you install it, you can see the icon will look like this, and you can use this icon to you can turn it on. It opens up a page, and all you have to do is paste your entire response message in here, and you can find your path. And I showed you the different types of assertions that we have. I'll be sending you a separate document as well that will explain in detail all the different types. But the one that you're probably going to be using most of the time is your JSON path match, which is you want to verify the path and the value, and maybe if you only want to verify the value, then you just use contains. Then lastly, we spoke about the status code, which is there to make your life easy, because on the job things will go wrong, right? Sometimes you even want things to go wrong. It's part of your testing. You're purposely trying to get things, you're trying to break the web service, by providing wrong passwords, expired tokens, a wrong resource name, trying a method that you're not allowed to try, you put in invalid parameters. Maybe these are actually tests that you are doing yourself. And when these things happen, don't rely on having a pretty response message with a nice error message. Sometimes you might just have a blank screen. So it's really important that you know the numbers, what they mean, and that would help you debug your REST API. And that will be the end of our REST API class. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us on our usual Skype or by email, or I'll see you guys in class as well, and we can ask more questions. Thank you very much, and have a lovely day.